PR Connections Radio presents. This podcast is brought to you by Envision U. Envision U has discovered how to impact spirit, body, and soul with spray technology in just 30 seconds. With Envision U, you can achieve optimal health and start living the life you have always dreamed of. Use the promo code envisionu.com/VernDix to take control of your health naturally.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to JP's Teachers Lounge, Season 1, Episode 8. And I'm with Mr. Eric Francis once again. I can't get rid of you.
You keep inviting me back.
Of course. I'm kidding.
I know. I'm glad you have me come on. I'm glad we can have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I'm actually extra excited today because we're going to talk about and it was your idea, your input. So I really appreciate it. You got me to thinking once again, talking about a teacher shortage. Is it a teacher shortage problem or a teacher retention problem? And I'm really excited to talk about this because we're obviously not going to solve the problem, but we're going to talk about certainly a lot of things. And the reason I'm excited, of course, is to always talk to you. We always have an interesting conversation, but I am an actual example or a statistic of this phenomenon, because back in 2018, which was, 7 years ago, I got to the point where, well, first of all, I put in 20 years or 19 years in the school district here. Mm-hmm. And in 2016, the school where I was teaching, it was a court continuation school where I taught the kind of the rough around the edge kids, along with doing adult ed, in the afternoons. The school closed down. They were restructuring the behavior schools, and there were 7 schools in the school district, seven behavior schools, where kids get expelled, and then that's where they go. That's where they end up.
Right.
And it was around 2016. They were talking about restructuring to have the schools take control of the expulsion kids, and have like an in-house within an in-house suspension school within the school. There was a whole push about doing that. And so my school was on the chopping block, and I think there were 4 schools, and there were 7, dropped it down to 3. I was one of the remaining schools, or I was one of the schools on the chopping block. But of course I went to surplus, and I was guaranteed a position the following year. And I went to a middle school, and I absolutely was in misery. I was horrible. And I think because it kind of hit me all at once, because from 2006 to 2016, all of a sudden I was thrown in a whole different atmosphere, and a lot of things that changed, and not necessarily, for the better. And the reason in 2018, so 2016, I went to the new school, and I was there for 2 years. And I told myself, I'll be there for 2 years, and then I want to get out. I want to move somewhere else, maybe get a counseling gig or just do something else. Nope, couldn't get out. I couldn't get interview, or I couldn't get hired from anywhere else. I thought I'm going to be stuck there, and I didn't want to. And I turned 50, and life is too short. I'm going to be miserable. I put in 19 years. I deserve better. And with actually teaching at the behavior school, they gave me extra retirement credit. So actually I retired with a little over 20 years. And I was just fed up because I hated the bureaucracy. I hated the whole, and again, my situation was, I was out of it for like 10 years, even though my school was tough in other ways. But in terms of bureaucracy, it was not really tough. Other things were tough about it. And my plan A was to try to get another job at another school, perhaps a counseling gig or something else, and just, put in another, 7 to 10 years or whatever. That didn't work. I was unhappy, miserable. Did not like the way the school was. Did not like the lack of discipline, and it was just horrible. And I felt like I was set up to failure. And then, so my plan A was to do that. That didn't work. So plan B was retire or resign. And then, I resigned and then tried to get reapply from the outside, and then get another job. They didn't accept me. And so I went ahead and retired because I needed some money coming in.
Right.
And then I started doing other things, kind of on the side. So I understand there's a teacher shortage problem. I think it's more, to me, I think it is more of, a lot of people like to teach. They want to teach, but then they run into problems and it's hard to keep them. So I'm still teaching now, and I'm making less money, but I'm happier and I have autonomy and I have support, and it's it's a much better atmosphere. And I always had a coworker years ago who always said, the teachers don't quit because of the pay, because they know how much you get paid. It's the working conditions. It's everything else.
Yep. Yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's not, more, what do they say? More money, more problems. I mean, look, we are underpaid, and that is a huge thing. Teachers are underpaid. You and I, when we were teachers in Blythe, because there wasn't much stuff to do around there, and we made pretty much a decent paycheck because you and I were renting at the time, and then the housing wasn't very, but that, still, I mean, it was below what, 40,000. Throw them more money. And that's the thing, is like, well, we'll give you $10,000 more. I mean, that's something that they said out here. We want to do a $10,000 raise. Yeah, well, great. That'll allow me to buy Starbucks maybe 5 days instead of 4. It's not the money. It's I would say it's kind of more so like the climate and the culture and a leadership issue. What? So you were trying to transfer within your school district to another school? Okay. And they wouldn't take you?
Right.
Did they ever tell you why?
No, but I'm sure the principal did not. The principal lost a lot of people. I was actually going to voluntarily surplus myself at the end of the year and go somewhere else. But they had lost so many teachers in that school that there was no justification for that, because my position was there. I could have stayed there forever.
Right.
But I was there for 2 years. My first year I got a satisfactory eval. Second year I got an unsatisfactory.
Why'd you get an unsatisfactory eval? That's the problem with evaluations. I mean, exactly. Evaluation is supposed to help you grow, and evaluation help. It's really interesting, Jane. After I left Blythe, I went to this middle school I worked with in Cave Creek, Arizona. I opened the middle school with this person, Sonoran Trails Middle School. Dr. Adrian Gibson, who's I can count on one hand how many bosses or principals I've worked with, or leaders I've worked with that really were true leaders. You can count on one hand and not put up every finger. I'll never forget when I was my pre-conference, and I came in, I had to evaluate myself. And I walked in, and she says to me, "Eric, I've been doing this for 20-something years, and I always find something that I have an area of growth or need for improvement. So if you dare to come in here marking off that you are excelling on every aspect of your evaluation, you and I are going to have a problem." And I said, "Adrian, I need to go reevaluate my evaluation," because that's what the evaluation should be. The fact that you didn't get accepted at that school, James, probably has nothing to do with you. It has to do more so with the bureaucracy and politics within the system. You are a veteran teacher, and you might have cost a lot to be on that person's staff. That might have been the reason why. That's what's happening to a lot of these veteran teachers who want to transfer. And a lot of these veteran teachers whose schools are closing and they're put into this, pool. So years ago, if you remember, it was easy to transfer because you would put yourself into what's called, I guess, the draft, and you could draft into open positions. What also happened was that if you had a veteran teacher who was not an effective teacher, or not a good teacher, or had some issues, they used to draft those teachers out and dump them in the other positions. That's how some of these teachers got into these schools that are considered to be like the benchmark schools, or the highly excelling schools, that they drafted them out from where they were an issue and they got into these open positions. Well, then they started changing it to say you have to interview for the position, which is what sounds like what happened to you. But I'm hearing about a lot of veteran teachers who are not getting the jobs because of reasons that are out of your control. You have more experience, which means that you're going to cost more money on that line budget. You may be older than the leader you're interviewing for, and that can get you kind of intimidating. But they're also looking to see that, how long are you going to last? How long are you going to stay? So a lot of veteran teachers like yourself, where you're going to go to that school and you're up there in terms of your years, in terms of profession, not age, but profession, is that principal going to be put into another position where they're going to have to replace you in 2 or 3 years because you retired? You see what I'm saying? So that's the hard part with it. And that's the sad part with it. And I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Money, I'll tell you this, money was the reason why I left the classroom to be an administrator. Pretty much my sole reason why, my primary reason. I would say, not even prior sole, I'd say it was a driving reason. Mm-hmm. But I liked being in the classroom. I liked being a teacher. I mean, I kept on hearing this thing about instructional leadership. And when I became an administrator, it was everything but. I was a cop without a badge. I was a therapist. I was a marriage counselor. I was an accountant. I was a politician. Never did I really get to be that instructional leader because I was too busy managing and too busy being these other things than an instructional leader. And you don't go into education for the money. That's definitely true. But the problem is, what are we doing to make our teachers want to stay? So like when you said there's not a teacher shortage, there's a teacher retention. There's no teacher shortage. There's a ton of teachers out there. There's a ton of people with teaching certificates out there. They're just not working in schools. They're working in sales. They're working in other things.
And right. And every time when I look at teaching, I look at education, I try to think of, okay, how could I transfer that in real world situations for perhaps non-teachers, people who are non-teachers who kind of understand. I mean, you think of if you owned a restaurant and you had heavy turnover, consistent turnover. I mean, you're going to have people who quit, like a restaurant or even a fast food. Let's say restaurant. You're always going to have people leaving for better jobs. They get married or whatever, better jobs. But when you have schools, and think about our school here our school district here in Las Vegas, it grew so much, so fast that you had principals who wouldn't stay, who are only going to stay there for a couple of years and then bounce up somewhere else. So you didn't have consistent management. And if the principal was good, that principal is going to be gone in a year or two. But you have schools who, some schools where at the end of the year, they have a 40, 50, 60% turnover. And that principal should be fired. If this were a real world, if this was a real world situation, if you had a consistent turnover where you're the manager of let's say again, a restaurant, just to keep things simple, just a Applebee's or Chili's, whatever, and you had a consistent turnover of 40 to 50 to 60%, wouldn't your boss question you?
Yeah. But I think there's so many mitigating circumstances as to why people quit. it's kind of funny because like in teaching, like you're not supposed to quit. And we just had a report here in Arizona that 1,000 teachers have resigned over the course of first semester. And there's still a lot of unfilled positions, and positions that are being taught not by highly qualified educators or certified educators. I think it's trickier than that. The thing is also the fine line between climate and culture. And Dr. Anthony Muhammad talks great about this in his books, that he talks about how climate, and this is kind of my interpretation of it. So this is the Eric Francis summarizing of it. Climate is the feeling, but culture is the belief. You can have your teachers who are all happy to be there, but if they don't believe in the mission and vision of the school, or they don't live the mission and the vision of the school, then it's not going to be effective. Then it's going to be a miserable, it's you're not going to get the results. The teachers can be happy. The teachers can be satisfied. I'm fine. But if you don't have that cultural belief that like, why are we here? It's kind of that's the mission and the vision. And there's so many factors as to why teachers are leaving. Pay is a factor, but also appreciation, value, worth, safety. We got some serious issues going on in our classroom. We got some serious environments where, some people's lives are being endangered. Now, the hard part is with education is that everything is like a polar opposite. It's a pendulum. You either go 180 this way to the right or 180 to the left. There's this guy out there who's pushing a cart around his school. And he talks about how, if kids are disruptive in class, you just yank them out. Okay. You remove them, but what are you doing to make sure that, to find out why that child is behaving that way? Now, I agree, if it's a violent situation, if someone's disrespectful or swears at you, you don't just yank them out. You gotta find out what's going on there. I mean, there might be a bunch of things going on with the kid. Now, I'm not saying no consequences. I'm not saying that, and that's right. The other 180. The other 180 is, it's all about interpretation. Like when you say restorative practices does not mean no consequences. But what you have to do is, what are you doing to have that child understand kind of the message of saying, not in here, not up in here. What are we doing to basically preserve that environment that makes teachers want to stay? If a child is consistently acting up in class, why? And if your principal is not going to back you up if the child is acting up in class, then what are you going to do in class to take control of it? What can you do? I hear these stories about, well, my principal doesn't back me up for discipline. Okay, fine. Then you take control of it. You give the discipline. And if there's some disagreement and the principal says something, to say, what do you want me to do? I sent them to you. You sent them back with a candy bar. Okay? This is pretty serious. You get the parents involved. The parents are involved. That's it. You got to set the tone. You and I taught some of the toughest kids, and you and I taught some kids, not even just in the behavior school you were in, but when we were in Blythe, California, our kids, they're pretty tough. Wouldn't you agree?
They were tough to motivate, they did not have a whole lot of background. I mean, overall, they were good. I mean, I think most of them were good kids, but you're right. They were rough around the edges, and it's I mean, to me, it's not. I don't want to come off as like saying it's all the principal's fault. It's all
no, you're not.
Right. It's again, like you said, it's a pendulum is swung both one way or the other. And as a teacher, right, you always you're judging their behavior. You're not judging the person. You're judging their behavior. if you have to send them out, you know, and you send you like again, if you have the attitude of I'm just going to send the kids out, okay, that's a band-aid. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't solve the problem. Like you said, why are they misbehaving? What's going on with them? Talk to them. As a teacher, we have to invest in our time and effort to talk to a student. Remember, we were talking about PRC, the PRC Pupil Responsibility Center, and we were talking about there's a book idea there, and I remember the PRC. The guy went to a training and brought it back and then trained us and told us about it. Now, yes, I mean, as teachers, I remember myself. There were a few times when I abused that privilege. I wanted to get rid of a kid, and the kids abused the kids abused the privilege because that was their way. Oh, I can leave. I can be gone in a class, do a little write a few sentences, and then come back to class.
What was the song we used to sing about that? Was it the OPP? We used to go, you go to PRC, yeah, you know me. You go to PRC, yeah, you are me. You're a frequent flyer, yeah, that's what I be. You know, I think that when you and I were in our 20s, we made up that song. Like, you know, we used to we did something. It was or down with the PRC or something like that. We made up a song about it. But you're dead on right. Because do you remember when our vice principal at the time went into the PRC and he saw all the kids' drawings and all all the stuff because it became a timeout room. Mm-hmm. You know, it lost its the whole thing. I remember about the PRC and the genius of the PRC that really shaped my teaching is that was a last resort. Like that was we wanted that child. And we as teachers did not want to send that kid to the trailer, which was the PRC. It was one of those, and it wasn't. I don't think it was even one of those. What are those mobile units? What you call them? I taught in one of those. The bungalows out there.
Yeah, the portables.
Yeah. Portable. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
My age is showing. I'm forgetting words and everything now.
Oh, stop it! You're younger than I am.
Well, yeah, 1 year, big brother. All right. So the thing is,
I'm 57. I'm 57.
All right, 2 years. I just turned 55. So, but I remember it wasn't even a portable. I think it was a trailer. Wasn't it a trailer?
I think so. Yeah.
It wasn't even a portable. It was like kind of like a mobile, you know, like a Winnebago kind of thing. And the thing is that we did everything. We had that routine, and I even am doing that now with teachers in a way to say that how can you make this where the child understands there's going to be a consequence for their actions, but they can take control as to whether the consequence is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I have never had a PRC situation like that. One of the things I also realized with my assistant principal was that if you send kids down, and you send kids down a lot, and I was an AP who was in charge of discipline, if I see a kid who's a frequent flyer, or if I see more than one kid often coming to your class, it's kind of raising my eyebrows a little bit to say, okay, it might not just be the kid. Something's going on here. Okay.
Yeah, it's a red flag. It's a red flag for sure.
But it's not something to like do a gotcha, kind of like your evaluation gotcha. And that's why teachers are leaving, because they don't feel valued. They don't feel supported. Everything's a case by case scenario. Some people act up. I mean, we have all these kids now who, you know, have these divergent diagnoses and things going on that's larger than ever. You know, we have a lot of social emotional. Oh, I said it. I'm sorry. Fight Club. What's the first rule of Fight Club?
Never talk about the Fight Club.
That's the same thing I say about SEL. For first rule of SEL, don't talk about SEL. There's a lot of kids with affective learning issues that basically there's a lot going on in there. Now, extreme cases, if the kid's violent in the class, if the kid's, mouthing off at the class, mouthing off at you and everything, yeah, you got to have administration step in and do something. Okay. But the thing is that teachers will stay if they feel important and valuable and worthy, and they find the culture, the belief of the culture to be important, valuable, and worthy. Money is an issue, but that's the wicked problem of education. What do we do to raise teacher salaries? Like, you guys don't have a state tax, right?
Right.
Okay, well, it's where a lot of the money comes from. You guys got a lot of money coming from the casinos that can fund your state and also probably fund education. What's really interesting was, do you remember how they used to take luxury tax on cigarettes and say that would fund education? You remember that?
I remember in California, they talked about the lotto, the California lotto. And it gets into bureaucracy. It goes through too many people's hands, and it gets the whole bureaucratic monster.
That's the problem with schools. It's a bureaucracy, And Jay, what other profession do you know where it's your first year, you're fresh out of school, and they give you your work and your manual and put you in your classroom, and they say, pasta lasagna, don't get any on you. And you may have some mentors, you may have some coaching and everything. And the preparation for these new teachers, they come in so wide-eyed, they're ready to go, go decorate their room and have their own classroom and all these kids, and they're all so happy with it. And by October, I used to do that when we used to coach teachers and even my PD, and they would tell me, like, someone would say, yeah, I went home crying. And I go, well, that's your first cry. And I used to tell them, like, your first year of teaching is like your driver's test. You go through it, and you're just never going to teach like that again, because you're going to learn from it.
I remember getting sick a lot. My immune system. Yeah. I mean, that's
your stress. That's your stress.
It's night and day now. I mean, but yeah, that was, and it's, when you talk about the money, the thing is, even if you made a lot of money, but you're miserable, like I was miserable at that middle school, it's not worth it, because you have to go through so much. And again, it's the support system is one thing, but when you feel like you're set out to fail, that's what I didn't like. That's another thing I didn't. I mean, am I really gonna make a difference? Am I really gonna help these kids? And when you have, and at least in my school district, what they would always do is, it's funny because the legislature here they meet every other year. And so the following year, well, we get a 2% raise the following year. Okay, great. And then the 4% was always the following year, because they have it in some kind of account earning 20%, and then they'll give us 4%. But then the following year, when we got our raise, somehow magically class sizes would almost, like, not double, but the class sizes would always increase. So in other words, okay, here's your money, but you're gonna have like an average of like 37 students in a class, and here's your teacher work day from like 7 o'clock till like 2:11. But there's no way on God's green earth that you're gonna finish all your work between that time. So basically, what they're saying is, you got to put some extra time in and work, and you're not going to be compensated for the money anyways. Now, the person I am, the kind of teacher I am, I'll admit, I think I developed some bad habits as a teacher, especially working in the behavior school, because even though, like, it was a lot easier in some ways, it was a lot harder, like, actually dealing with those kids. But I can only take so much a day, and I need to go home, because tomorrow's another day. I I remember working at schools where my next door neighbor, my neighbor would, I mean, she'd be there till 7, 8 o'clock at night, like ordering dinner, she'd have like containers, for lunch and dinner. So, I mean, she's like I couldn't do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. The only time I did that was when I was coaching. If we had an away game, if there was an away game, I'm putting in a 12, 13, 14-hour day just being at school,
Right.
and that was rough because like the next day I'm like, going to go back into work and I just feel burned out. But that's the kind of teacher I am. I like, I don't like to put in long hours. I'm not that kind of person.
You shouldn't have to. That's something I'm trying to work with teachers, is that how can you teach less and the kids learn deeper? How can you, Robert Jackson wrote a book, Never Work Harder Than Your Students. And if you feel like you're working harder than your students, something's wrong. And that's not your fault. It's just the way it's always been. When I was an English teacher, high school English teacher, I had kind of the epiphany where, the kids would turn in their papers and I'd want to give their grades back to them, in a timely manner. So I used to beat myself up and grade all weekend. I think I had 120 contacts that year, and it was AP classes too. So they're always writing. And I remember that I would write copious notes, edits, give them notes and everything. And, it's funny, James, they used to say this. They used to go like, hey, did you grade my paper yet? And it's like, well, how long was your paper? 5 pages. Okay, well, I have about 120 contacts. Multiply that by 5. That's how many pages I have to read in a time here. Now, if I gave you that as an assignment, that you have to read that many pages, you'd think it was unfair. You know what the difference is? He goes, what? I said, at least what I'll give you is grammatically correct. So the thing is I realized that they didn't read the notes. They just cared about the grade. Cool, I passed. All I failed. It all got in the same place. Okay. It all was in the trash can after class. I mean, you remember that old commercial where the Native American man is on the horse and he looks at the trash and he has a tear come down his eye and he goes, people start pollution, people can stop it. That was me. I was like, oh my gosh, they just threw it away. So I remember the next day I said to the kids, I said, did you even read my notes that I give back to you? They go, no, we just want to know if we passed or failed. That's it. Okay. So what I did was I set up a scoring guide. And the AP exam, I'm really sad to hear they don't do this anymore, but the AP exam everybody started out with a 5, and they grade the paper holistically. They're not going into the grammar. They're just looking at this paper holistically. Based upon the quality of the paper, it either went up or you went down from the 5. So I'm looking at that scoring guide I made, which is a combination of the AP rubric and also the 6 traits of writing. And I'm going just 6, 5, 9, 8, just checking it. And I put dots where I see something. So I gave the kids the paper back and they'd say to me, well, why did I get this grade? And I said, well, this is my lunch hour. This is my time after school. I'll set up a time and we'll talk. So they'll bring in the paper. I think I told you this story maybe on one of our podcasts. I feel like I've told you this story before. Maybe I've just said this story so many times. I'm not.
It doesn't sound familiar, but I could
that's
be wrong.
Good. Okay, so this first time on JP's Teacher Lounge. First time Eric Francis. So the thing is that the kids who cared would come and say, "Why'd I get this grade?" And I would say, okay, let's look at it. And I'd look at where the dot was and I'd read what it says. Okay, so what are you saying here? I'm saying this. Is that what it sounds like? Does that sound clear? No. Okay, boom. Here's a Post-it. How would you say it? And I have like those long Post-its where they could write it. And their paper would be full of Post-its. And I'd say to them, okay, because you came and saw me today. So let's say they got a 6 on the paper. Because you came and saw me, you learned something. I'll give you a 6.5. If you rewrite it tonight for me and you make it with all those errors fixed, I'll give you a 7. It's up to you. Okay. So some kids would do it some kids be like, well, I got to work tonight. And I said, well, what can you get to me by Friday? And I'd always have that kid who would forget to me by Friday. And I'd see them on Monday and I'd say, so what happened with the paper? I don't know. I said, you just to get away from you? Yeah. Okay. You still want that 7? Yeah. Okay. So when can you get it to me? I'll get it to you tomorrow. Okay. See, and that's the thing. You notice I didn't let them off the hook. I cared about basically saying, can they get that to me? Because I know what the errors are going to be. Now, initially, I had a lot of contacts, but over time, where they started to learn and their writing got stronger, or they started to see things mathematically, because I used to teach out of my content area during my prep and teach math and do the same thing. They got stronger and they wouldn't come because they didn't need to. Their writing got stronger. Their grades went up because I was able to have that one-on-one time. Now, the rumor went around that if you go see Francis, he'll raise your grade. Not Mr. Francis, because they called me Francis, so whatever. But one kid tried to pull that on me, and he didn't agree with anything I said. And I said, I think we're done here. And he goes, well, you're going to give me the grade because I came? I said, no, I'll give you the grade because you learned. And you haven't learned anything. All you want to do is debate with me. And he said, well, you don't understand what I'm writing. And I said, exactly. And he goes, well, that's your problem. I said, no, that's your problem. And I used the music analogy. I said, here's the deal. You're not writing to basically show me what you know. You're writing to care for your audience, that you want to basically share with me. You want to teach me. You need to care about your audience. And they were a musician. I said, here's the deal. You can say you've written the greatest set of songs that could be put on an album. And if you made that album, it would be the greatest thing since Sgt. Pepper's and Dark Side of the Moon. But if nobody understands what the heck you're saying or what you mean by it, you're going to sit in your bedroom and play in front of your mirror and go, I'm the greatest musician in the world. Everybody misunderstands me, And that's the thing and that's the thing we need to actually with the kids. But when it comes to teacher retention, teacher shortage, you got to have a principal that supports you. In our last show, we talked about entrepreneurialism. With the entrepreneurialism, you got to have a school leader who's not going to micromanage you, who's going to trust you, who's going to be able to say, hey, I know what this guy's doing. I know it's in the best interest of kids. I know that they're doing it not for the self-serving reason. They're not hurting anybody. But you got to have that school leader who's brave enough to stand up for you.
I remember, again, in our Blythe days, Mr. Arneson, what a great guy, what a great principal. Yeah. And he would come into class like every day just to observe. And he didn't make you feel like, okay, I'm judging you. He wants to get a feel. He wanted to get a feel of what talk about the climate and the culture. It's not just one day or 2 days. In the school district here, I mean, I remember one year I did not get observed at all, but she filled an evaluation and it was a satisfactory. She would come into my classroom for certain things, but she never actually observed me. And then turns out she
not in Blythe. We didn't have female.
No, I'm sorry. No, this was here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
But it turns out that same administrator, like the following year, she retired. So she was on her way out. But yeah, I mean, you can get teachers, but it's keeping them, and that's the issue, because if you need good, like you said, you need good principals, good leaders that don't micromanage, but lead, but also assist and show that, hey, you know what? I'm here for everybody. I'm here to support you. I'm here to support the students. Let's support each other. And if there is an issue, let's talk about it. Oftentimes, at least here in Las Vegas, there's always been that attitude of administrators coming in and trying to catch this teacher. Okay, I caught you. Here, I'm going to mark this off. Okay. And what's so stupid is that in the evaluation, system before, you had in all these categories a rubric of a 1 through 4, and a 1 being really low, 4 being really high. So if in any category, each category had like 4 or 5 different lines, different sections, and if you got a 1 or a 4, they had to write stuff about it. So oftentimes you get a 2 or a 3. You get mostly 2s and 3s because they didn't want to go through. They don't want to go through all that. They feel like they had to justify. Oh, they give you a 1. Okay, well, you have to justify that. Well, I'm not going to give them a 1. Okay, we'll give you a 4. Well, you're not good. So it's either a 2 or a 3. So they went around it. But I don't, the whole again, going back to the bureaucracy of it. I remember when I was at the middle school that I couldn't absolutely stand. My first year, to have an observation, we had to set up an observation date for our administrator. Okay, fine, but then I had to fill like a 2 to 3 page report.
Right.
To preview. It's like, when am I going to do that?
That's your formal observation. James, I will tell you this. Most schools, the evaluation tools that they use is either a framework that's created by Charlotte Danielson or a framework that's created by Robert Marzano. That's what most schools use. The problem is that when they're not using it for the intent that it was meant to be. Charlotte Danielson will tell you that, people are not using her framework for the intent that it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a gotcha. It's supposed to be a help you. Same with Barb Marzano's. I have a good buddy, Craig Randall, who wrote a book called Trust-Based Observations, which is more collaborative, which is more assistive. It's really actually a really great evaluation system. He actually took my questioning, Bloom's questioning pyramid, and did an observation with that. And it's about building the relationship. The observation tool should not be a gotcha. It should be a help you. So when people, get upset that they're not distinguished, how dare you? Okay, well, you're not distinguished in everything. And that's the thing, even like my principal, Adrian Gibson, told me, you got to look. And it's funny because I used to do my self-observation and I used to grade myself lower than what my administrator does. I do that even now as a professional development person. The worst thing you can say to me is how to go, because I never think it goes well. The minute I'm like, oh, yeah, great. I mean, I know PD people who go, hey, that was a pretty good keynote out there, right? Probably one of the best things you ever heard, right? That was worth $50,000. I just said the thing, let the positives be so loud it drowns out the negatives. I mean, seriously, the minute you start believing your hype, it's done. Okay. And it's funny because I just had dinner with a friend of mine who said, you don't give yourself enough credit. You don't realize how much of an impact you have. And it was Walter Payton. I'm going to paraphrase it because I think Dwayne Johnson paraphrased it, to say, show them how good you are and let them tell you how great you are. But the problem is, if the teacher does not feel supported, they're not going to stay. There are teachers who stay in some of the worst.
I'm one statistic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like that. I mean, I like that when I was an assistant principal. People realize that the administrators get evaluated too. And when you're an assistant principal, you get evaluated by your principal. And if your principal doesn't like you, they'll evaluate you out. You're not going to get fired as a teacher. They'll put you on a plan of improvement, but there's a date with administrators to say, if this is not working, you got to evaluate them out. I think in Arizona, it's March 14th. So, and it's really, it's a wicked problem. Can't really solve it, but it needs to be addressed. It starts with the leadership. What is the culture you're creating? We talk about what are we doing to get our kids to come to school? What are we doing to help our teachers want to come to school, want to come to work? But again, halfway, you got to understand this is a job. and there's some, there's some, structures in there that basically, if you're feeling so miserable, and I tell this all the time, people all the time, it's not worth the misery. Well, then what am I going to do? Something better than this. And you have to look at it. You have to look at, I mean, I've seen schools where all the teachers are happy and the kids are horrible, And when I say horrible, it's not behavior, it's mostly academic. Okay. I've seen schools where the culture is, the environment is tough, but because they have a strong culture, they're surviving and they're thriving. But the thing is that what are we doing to have our teachers want to stay? There's a book, someone named Salome Thomasel, I Choose to Stay. And that he talks about a strong point that he could have moved on, he could have done all these things, but he chooses to stay. And that's what his mantra is. I choose to stay. There's times I think about going back to the classroom. Every day I want to go back to the classroom. Why don't I go back to the classroom? Well, my issue probably would be more so because I have a family and I have, my wife's also a teacher, and you can't survive on 2 teacher salaries. You just can't. Someone's got to go into administration, or someone's got to go and bring in the big money with it. And also, there is a bureaucracy. But the thing is that what is making you and motivating you? That this is a job that you need to look at it, and you need to look at your own health with it. If you're getting sick, then you need to start looking at your own health. If you're miserable, then you need to start looking at why you're miserable. Don't stay if you're not liking it, because it's not going to get better until you try to make it better.
I mean, I think again, it's a holistic approach, and again, you were saying like you're not giving yourself enough credit. When I say you, we in collective, you have to be your own worst critic. You have to say to yourself, okay, this was okay, but how can I get better? And I'm in an environment right now where I want to be better. You know what I mean? I want to get better. I want to know, okay, what can I do for these kids? What extra could I give a little extra into my school? Since I am appreciated, I'm supported, and it makes me want to do better. It makes me be creative and think, okay, like, but don't beat yourself up either. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that balance. Like, okay, you know what? That lesson did not go very well, but next, okay, how can I tweak it? How can I work it? And then have a principal or administrator who understands that, and also does not allow the kids to run things. You have to be not authoritarian, but authoritative. You have to be, I'm the teacher, what I say goes, but at the same time, don't be a tyrant either. So again, it kind of goes back to that, a nice balance.
When I've had my worst principals, honestly, James, when I was an administrator, I never got beyond assistant principal. I had a great set of administrators when I was on the team with the high school, when I was a dean of students. But when I went to work up and became an assistant principal, now I take responsibility as myself with it, because I'll tell you straight right now, I wasn't ready. I should have stayed a dean of students another year, but I just had my second kid. I needed money. When I was a dean of students, I had administrative duties, but I was a teacher on assignment, and I was paid with the teacher salaries. And, my principal, Carol Pollock, she was a great, mentor. She gave me all these stipends to work on the webpage and do all this stuff to kind of balance it out. But when I went to be an assistant principal, and I'm going to tell you straight right now, when I was a dean of students, I was in a low socioeconomic school in a low socioeconomic area, gang heavy. They call it the square, where it was in Paradise Valley in Phoenix. I went to work at a high socioeconomic school that was excelling. And I'll tell you straight right now, James, I should have stayed at the school where there was more social cultural issues, more, the gang issues. because the teachers there were very dedicated. The teachers there were very, committed to it. At the high socioeconomic, the thing I had was with the teachers and my principal, and she wouldn't mentor. And that's the thing people need. That's what makes people stay. You need to find a mentor. Like, who was your mentor in Blythe pretty much? Was it Rosemary?
Well, it was my when I first got there as a new teacher, they assigned me a mentor, and it was the PE coach, one of the two
Star
one of the two ladies. Star, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had Linda Hazelton. Okay. She was my mentor.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had Star.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had Linda Hazelton, and she was great. And I had a lot of student issues, parent issues up there, because again, they couldn't understand me, and I was mouthy back to them, and they were mouthy back to me. So and that's the thing. But Bob Jensen, Ted Arneson, great mentors. Rosemary was a strong leader, good mentor. Amusing, but strong, good mentor.
I remember one time your classroom was right next to the teacher's lounge, and we heard you yelling. And I remember I was in there one time with Rosemary, like, Rosemary. Oh, Eric, please stop yelling.
Yeah, because that was my first year teaching, and I'm like, hey, knock it off. Oh, so it's like, and what did they do? They took us under our wing. And they made sure. I remember, like, I remember those stories. I remember you telling me those stories. Like, Rosemary was just like, "Oh, Eric, I wish you stopped yelling." Oh my God, I made every mistake in the world, as a rookie.
So did I. We all did.
Yeah, but we had mentors. Why did we stay? Why did we stay? James, we had no reason to stay. You and I didn't have girlfriends in the town. Well, at the time, I didn't have it. We're not gonna get into that. But the thing is that, we had no connections into the town. We had no, roots in the town. Why did we stay?
Hey, my first year, I dated half the women in town, both of them.
Okay, stud. But yeah. We're not going to get it. We have a story about something we're not going to say on the air.
No.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
It was like my way of saying, like, making it sound really good, but because how small, small the town was. But never mind.
Wait, here's the perfect example about retention. Okay, here's a perfect example of retention. You and I are in this rural, migrant farming, low socioeconomic community, no roots there. Nothing. Why did you stay 3 years and why did I stay 2 years? Because we had good mentors
and good support. And it was a good community. It was a good community, and I was. You still had your life in Phoenix. I still had my life in Torrance or Harbor City, where I'd go to my mom's house every couple of months and stay there for the weekend. But you're right, though.
I went home to Phoenix for the weekend. You remember that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I didn't. I would go for me it was maybe once a month,
because you were farther than I was. I was a 2-hour drive by the 10. Yeah. I mean, seriously, what I would do is Friday would end, I'd go back to my apartment, get my laundry, drive home, go see my parents. At the time, my wife, when was my wife now, was my girlfriend, and I would spend the weekend with her and then come back on Monday. The thing is that we had good mentors. We were the perfect example of a place that had a teacher shortage, and people stayed because of the relationships and the mentoring.
And something like that, in a place like that, where even though they created a good environment, but they knew that there was a heavy turnover, so they were very very proactive in terms of like recruiting and getting teachers, because they knew they were going to lose a lot of teachers, and not necessarily for the anything bad, but just the way things are. We have to start wrapping it up. But what I want to do is, again, we talked a little bit about, again, like the issue or the challenge of retaining. You can get teachers to come, but who, and you're going to have some that they're going to leave for whatever reason, another job opportunity or relocation or whatever. But if you have a heavy a retention problem, there's obviously things that need to be improved, need to be changed. And I don't know how many. I need to find the analytics of this show. I don't know how many people actually are tuning into this. Hopefully more than just the two of us, but you never know. But if you're watching this, you're a teacher, please reach out to us. And if you left a school, or if you're thinking about leaving the profession, reach out to us. Let's have a conversation. Let's keep the conversation going. No judgment, just talk. That's the thing about coming together and not judging each other, but understanding where we come from and finding good ideas of, making schools better, and then as a result, making communities better, and and continuing that. So I want to send a call out.
Yeah, find a mentor. If they're going to want to stay, find a mentor, not a coach, but also a mentor.
Right. But also, again, if you're out there, or the teachers are out there, if they see this, or educators or people who plan on going into education, reach out to us. We want to help you. And I'm still learning too, even though I'm a veteran teacher. Mr. Francis is a veteran teacher. There's always things to learn. There's always things to improve. But again, we want to create good schools with, as you said eloquently, climate and culture. I love that. I love that separation of, that's one of those things where it's kind of hard to define climate and culture, but that makes sense to me. Climate is the feeling, culture is the belief. That's awesome. So reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, James Spasudich. LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn, James Spasudich, and James Spasudich Communications. Reach out to us. We'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Mr. Francis, do you want to promote anything, or have your final thoughts?
Well, the final thought is just your happiness comes first, and your health comes first. And if you really want to do this, find a mentor. If you don't want to do this, and this maybe be something because, I had this, the pathway to do this is that you don't have to leave education if you're not happy in your situation. You can still stay in education. There's things you can do, and we can talk about that in a future show, but just really, if you want to stay, find a mentor, not a coach. Okay. Find a mentor, find your Obi-Wan, find your Mr. Miyagi, find the person who,
I love it. But again, movie references. I get it. That's awesome.
Find your Morgan Freeman, find whatever, the person that will be there and be your support and be the one who guides you.
Mr. Keating.
Yeah, Mr. Keating. Not even that. You're Mickey from Rocky, or you're Apollo from Rocky. Get that eye to tiger back, And that's the thing. If you want to contact me, email me, Eric, ERIK at Maverick, MAVERIK, no C in Eric, no C in Maverick, Eric at maverickeducation.com. You can go to my website, maverickeducation.com. I'm on LinkedIn as Eric Francis. My Facebook is private. But if you want to follow me on pretty much probably LinkedIn or Instagram, Maverick Education, at Maverick Education. And James, thanks so much for this forum. We're getting in the groove. We're getting in the groove here. We're getting into some good things.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in to JP's Teachers Lounge. Have a great night, everyone.
Did you know your clothing could help balance your body's pH levels? Our cutting-edge fabric technology naturally promotes optimal pH balance, helping you feel energized, refreshed, and at your best every day. Use promo code PRTalk for more info. Tap the link in the description or contact our experts at 702-445-9488 to learn more.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.